بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Indeed, all praises belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, the sustainer, and the controller of all that happens in the universe. And we invoke His peace and blessings upon His noble messenger, His family, His companions, and all those who follow them in righteousness until the end of time. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the ahadith that Al-Imam Nawawi rahimahullah relates in his famous collection, the 40 hadith. And Al-Imam Nawawi, in selecting these ahadith, 42 hadith to be precise, chose a hadith that forms the basis or the foundations for various topics and issues. And so if you look at the 42 hadith in this collection, you will find that they deal with a variety of topics and issues. But these form the basis and the guidelines for these issues. If we read these ahadith carefully, we will find that the Prophet ﷺ, if one studies these ahadith, would find that a certain pattern is emerging, a certain foundation is emerging in terms of how a Muslim should live Islam and practice Islam. So these ahadith are important because they teach us the concepts or the principles. Now the hadith I would like to share with you today is one that is also very well known. And quite often we use this hadith with each other. This is the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ مِمَّا أَدْرَكَ النَّاسُ مِنْ كَلَامِ النُّبُوَّةِ الْأُولَى إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. Some of the words that people have received من النبوة الأولى, from the previous prophets and messengers, words of wisdom. And this hadith indicates that not everything is necessarily abrogated or become outdated from the previous prophets and messengers in terms of their messages. Yes, there might have been changes in terms of specific rules that today are no longer applicable or applied. But it does not mean that when a new messenger was sent, everything of the former prophet was totally abrogated. At the very least, the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the concept of God, was always the same. That has never been abrogated. So at no point in time did any prophet preach that Allah is one, and then a later prophet came and abrogated that, preaching Allah is two or three. No. That message of the perception of God was always exactly the same, and it never was abrogated. But besides matters of belief, there might have been other rules or other laws and legislation that might have changed from time to time. But not everything. Not everything. Because in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ confirms this. That some of the concepts or the principles or the sayings that people have, that have been passed down for people throughout time from the previous prophets and messengers is إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. If you have no shame or no shyness, then do whatever you want. Now this hadith is important Because when we begin to look at the meaning or the meanings of the hadith, you will realize that it highlights a certain concept and principle and perspective that a Muslim must have. So to begin with, the Prophet ﷺ talks about shame or shyness. Al-haya idha lam tastahi. If you don't feel shy. Haya, of course, is this sense of shyness or a sense of shame perhaps that a person has that would inhibit them from doing certain things. Now some people have in nature some amount of shyness that is natural, that is within their nature. We know that there are some human beings who are very reserved, very shy people. Naturally they're like that. But there is a certain kind of, or a certain level of shyness that can be learned and should be learned. Now that is the shyness, or the shame, if you like, that would make a person consciously avoid what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden. We also know that the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari tells us, Al-haya'u min al-iman. Shyness, or this sense of shame that you feel, that will cause you not to do something because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is part of iman. Which means without that, a person's iman is flawed and defective. And in another hadith also in the Sahih, once a man was admonishing his brother for being too shy, telling him, you're too shy, you shouldn't be this shy, you should be more aggressive. And the Prophet ﷺ said to the man, Da'ahu, leave him alone. فَإِنَّ الْحَيَاءَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ. For surely shyness is from iman. But what exactly does this hadith mean? Does it mean we're allowed to do whatever we want as long as we don't feel shame? It's okay? Well, let's take a look at it. There are basically three views among the scholars in terms of the meaning of this hadith. One of them is that if something is something that you should not be ashamed of, there is no need to be shy of it or from it, something that is acceptable, then you should go ahead and do it. It means it's halal, it's permissible. If something is a matter for which a person need not be shy and people are not shy or are embarrassed or ashamed about it, it's not something to be embarrassed about. In other words, they say, these scholars, that it's not something that is wrong. It's not something that is disliked. Then go ahead and do it, no problems with that. إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي, that is, if this is a matter that is not one that people should be shy about doing or embarrassed about doing, then you go ahead and do it. The other meaning, the second meaning is, and this one is a warning for people, that if you don't feel any sense of shame, then go ahead and do whatever you want, but you will have to face the consequences. And what this implies is that there is no good in the person, or there is very, very little good in the person who feels no shyness or no sense of shame and embarrassment. Because for such an individual, they have no inhibitions. And so crossing the line is not a big deal for them. And so the hadith warns people that, look, if you don't feel shy about things and you do them, no problem, but remember, you will have to face the consequences. And the third meaning is more or less, as the scholars have said, a description, if you like, of the reality of people themselves. And that is, what the hadith means is that if people do not feel shy about something, they'll do it. And this is very significant, brothers and sisters, because it has a lot to do with how we're brought up and how we're raised, the things we're sensitized to. And it's important for us to realize this, especially with our children and our youth. Because if people are not ashamed of a certain thing, they'll do it. And so if we raise our children and our young people not being shy of this or ashamed of that or embarrassed about that, they will have no hang-ups doing these things. And this is exactly the dilemma we face, especially in the society in which we live, where children and young people, they see all kinds of things on the television. They see it in school when they go to school, and they're among people, peers who are like that. And so what happens, certain things that are objectionable in Islam begin to be seen as normal and okay. And so our Muslim children and our Muslim youth see no problems with that. So it is vital and necessary that we as parents and adults, we sort of debrief them when they come home. And as they grow, we need to instill within them that sense of haya, of shyness. Teach them what is halal and haram. Teach them what is permissible, what is prohibited. Teach them that it is Allah, the Creator, the Exalted, who made things permissible and who also made things prohibited. We need to teach them to be shy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to think of God first of all. To be ashamed that God knows what you're doing. And not to be too worried about people around them. So as they're small and growing, we need to instill within them and teach them this sense of haya, of shyness, so that they don't see things that are wrong, things that are objectionable, as being acceptable and being normal in society. And so this, of course, adds a greater burden on parents and on the adults as a community. But nevertheless, this is the challenge, this is one of the challenges we face as we live here, and we need to rise to this challenge. We need to find solutions to it. We need to become aware of the challenge itself and the solutions. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ taught us this very important concept, that whatever a person is trained to accept as normal, they'll do it. They'll have no hang-ups about doing it. And that's what's happening with our kids in school. That's what's happening in our society. So we need to be vigilant, and we need to teach them the things for which they need to be shy about. Of course, we shouldn't overdo it, but we need to teach them the things about which they should be shy, and they should have that sense of shyness, which will, inshallah, inhibit them or prohibit them and restrict them from doing that which is wrong and that which is haram. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us. May He open up our hearts and minds so that we can understand His message, and may He inspire us and motivate us to live by this message. May He cause us all to have that and to develop that sense of shyness, so that this shyness will be the barrier between us and that which is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah cause us to be among those who are shy of Him first and foremost. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.